by Alois Pichler and our graduate student Frederik Kettelhoit. So they are going to show us a new tool for studying Wittgenstein's remarks on the foundations of mathematics. So everyone knows Alois. I don't think he needs any introduction. Remarkable Wittgenstein scholar and the director of the Wittgenstein archives. So yeah, very glad to have you here. Okay, thanks.
Many thanks, Soren, and many thanks for the opportunity to show some of the work of the Wittgenstein archives here. I would like to take the opportunity to cordially invite you to pay us a visit in this very same house here on the 5th floor. And Jasmin or Frederik or me or Wilhelm, if he turns up, we are happy to give you a guided tour of the archives. Bill has cited quite a bit from the remarks on the foundations of mathematics, and as most of you will know, that is a book which Wittgenstein never has published himself. He hasn't even prepared it for publication himself. What he has prepared is the first part of that book, or what was published later by the trustees as the first part of that book. So that was, for some time at least, intended as a continuation of philosophical investigations sections up to 190 or something like that. And later, he either postponed that project of adding that onto philosophical investigations, or he completely abandoned it as something. But that's part of what we call the Wittgenstein Nachlass, which is the manuscripts and typescripts that Wittgenstein left behind when he died in 1951. And according to the catalog prepared by one of Wittgenstein's trustees, Georg Henrik von Richt, that's about 20,000 pages. And what we at the Wittgenstein archives do on the 5th floor in this building here is to produce lots of data and metadata for Wittgenstein Nachlass research. In 2000 we published the so-called Bergen electronic edition of Wittgenstein's Nachlass, which came out on CD-ROM. In one version also as a web edition distributed by Intellex Corporation, which is still available today on the website of Intellex Corporation, but the CD-ROM edition that came out at Oxford University Press, that one no longer runs on standard systems unless you do some special installment. So today we publish the Nachlass online, and what we have of transcriptions of the Nachlass and of metadata and of digital facsimile, here you see one facsimile, we put it all out online on our websites, and some of you will have been on some of our websites at least. So it's all out there. As much as our resources permit, we put it all out, and that's our main project today. Making the Wittgenstein Nachlass available for Wittgenstein researchers as data and metadata. And by data, we mean digital facsimile and transcriptions, first of all. So if you, for example, get to that manuscript here, which Wittgenstein called Mathematik und Logik, and he gave it the title F, then you can really, how does this work? Again, then you can really browse that entire notebook manuscript on our websites, and at some point you may end up on this page here. And you may want to read it, Die extensionalen Überlegungen, on the left-hand page, you see that text over there. So you may just want to read it, but you may also have some problems deciphering Wittgenstein's handwriting. Now this handwriting here is not really very difficult. So you can also find, in addition to the digital facsimile, actual transcriptions of that page on our website. And you can find a very easy reading version, which I put here on the upper side, die extensionalen Überlegungen, zum Beispiel der Heine-Borellsche Satz, zeigen, so sollen die Intentionen behandelt werden. An alternative to it, so soll man die Intentionen behandeln. So you can read all these 20,000 pages on our website in a rather reader-friendly transcription version. But you can also, if you want to engage with all the revision process that this page has undergone and all the writing acts that Wittgenstein performed on this page, you can look at the diplomatic transcription, which is on the lower side. And here you will see that every letter that Wittgenstein has deleted will be marked as deleted. Everything which is inserted by Wittgenstein, like here, ist, will be marked as inserted, and if the insertion is marked, then you will have a mark saying there is a mark there that tells where the phrase is to be inserted, and so on.
Is there actually bold font on the das?
No, the bold font is here indicating that he has been overwriting something, so maybe he wanted to say der before and then he overwrote it with das. So it just indicates there has something been going on there, and we do not really want to claim that it has been there or whatever, but something has been going on there. So that's what this shadow or bold AS or the I up there in bold here indicate. Now for this occasion today, I have added encoding of line endings. So here you have the line endings, which typically would not be included in the linear reader-friendly version, but in the diplomatic, where we have the encoding available of the line endings, it is included. So that actually permits you to do a line-by-line comparison of the original and the transcription. You may actually want to simply read the facsimile, and whenever you run into deciphering reading problems, you may switch over to the transcription, which in the case of line endings included, really helps you then read the facsimile. This is all out there on the internet, so it's out there on our web pages, and here I've included 2 screenshots of the transcription of this item there, as you will find it on. Actually, I'm sorry, I included two screenshots from another manuscript, which is yeah. But now you may want to know some more things about this page. If you read it, you will just read the extensionalen Überlegungen, zum Beispiel der Heine-Borellsche Satz. So the editorial philology part of our project simply takes care of making available the data on that page. It doesn't really tell you a lot about the data on this page. So you may not really know what is Heine-Borellsche Satz about. And in our metadata, we will then have a record that this refers to the theory which is called the Heine-Borellsche Satz. And it does therefore also refer to a work by Emile Borel. And another thing which you won't see from this page, but which will become available through the metadata which we give to this page, is that it has been written on a certain date, namely on the 25th of January 1943. Or yet another thing which you do not really see from the page, if you just look at the facsimile, is, well, where is this page to be found? Well, it belongs to a specific manuscript in the Nachlass, which is called Manuscript 127 by Georg Frederik, and it's on the page 39. You don't actually see page number 39 there. And this specific remark up there, so this is actually, sorry, this is page 40, but this specific remark up there starts on the previous page. So it The entire remark has the name MS12739, the third block on the page 39 and first block on page 40. Then you will find some other information. For example, that it has variants in other manuscripts, like in manuscript 124. And you will even find information that this remark has been edited in section 39 of part 5 of the remarks on the foundations of mathematics. And today we would like to show you now a new tool that has been developed by Frederik to make these metadata and data available for even more user-friendly and rewarding use than it has been possible up to now on our website. So our websites, this is our website, and what I've shown you up to now, you will all find it linked from this page here. But now I give the floor to Frederik.
Thank you. Thank you, Alois, for this very nice introduction, which enables me to now show you some of the things that we were talking about. So let me just see how I exit the slideshow. Okay. So this is the tool that I will be presenting you today. Let me increase the size a bit, maybe. Okay. So what we can do here is browse the Nachlass in different ways. So as Alois has already told us, there are of course the documents as categorized by, this probably a bit too large.
It's unübersichtlich.
Yeah, it does. Okay, hopefully it stays this way. Okay, so we can jump into the documents and browse the Nachlass as categorized by von Wright. So what we can do now is we can go exactly to the same document that Alois was talking about, the MS127, which is a pocket notebook and has the title by Wittgenstein, Mathematik und Logik. And we can now read this document in a somewhat reader-friendly version. So this way of presenting the document is completely abstracted from the physical page, so you won't find any page numbers there. But what we give you is a separation of the text into the different remarks as written by Wittgenstein. So what you can do now is you can, of course, read and browse the document, and also you can find out more about particular remarks by using the function here, which is available on the whole site for wherever you are. And this allows you to basically zoom in into this particular remark, and then up here see different information about this remark and see where this remark is contained, so to speak, in a very loose sense. So what we can see is, first of all, this is not very surprising. It is obviously contained in the document that we just came from. We can also see on which facsimile pages this contains. So this, there seems to be a page break in there since it's on 2 pages. We see the remark name as explained by Alois, so this is the page, and so this is the second remark on the 3rd page of the MS127. But we can also see the metadata that Alois was referring to. So we see the dating. This is a very exact dating in this case, because there must be some date in the document, but also we can see that it dates from 1943. So what this gives us is a way to now browse all of the documents that were, or all of the remarks that were written in this particular year. Because the logic of the whole site is that wherever you are in the Nachlass, whatever method you use to browse the Nachlass, you can always jump from one place into another place and change the representation, so to speak. So I started by browsing a particular document, but now if I click here, I'm now taken into a view of all the remarks, and as you can see here from the little scroll bar, this is quite a long list of all of these remarks in 1943. So if I'm interested in all of these remarks ordered chronologically, this is also available. So let's go back maybe to the start page, because if you have used the Nachlass websites of the Wittgenstein archives before, you know that this is already possible right now. You have a very nice way of reading the documents as they are categorized. But what we can now also do is we can access the Nachlass through different lenses, so to speak. And this is where the metadata once again comes in. So we've already seen that we can browse the Nachlass ordered by date, and in this case we have done it by year, because in most cases the dating is not precise enough to allow us any other way of access there, so only by year for now. But what we can also do is we can browse the Nachlass by the references to persons or the references to works.
Was that number in parentheses the number of items that year?
The number of remarks, yeah, that year, yes, exactly. So what we can now also look at is a reference to the work that was already discussed. So yeah, so there it is. And so for this particular work, we have 4 remarks referencing it. And the reference here doesn't always have to be a reference as obvious as this one, because here, quite obviously, Wittgenstein uses the term Heine-Borellsche Satz, but oftentimes he refers to work more implicitly, and this is also captured by the metadata. So this is something that you would not find by using a search engine as, for example, Wittfind, if you have used that before. And our metadata allows you to, for example, find references to certain works of Frege if Wittgenstein simply alluded to them but never really spelled out that he's talking about Frege. So for this use case, this can be quite useful. And so, as I told you, all of the different parts of the website are completely interlinked. So here we can now again do exactly the same thing we did before, and now switch to a different view if we like. We can go back to the view here, which is the document view, and we can also well, jump to the dating view as I've shown you before. So what is now also available, because as Alois said, this remark was published in the foundations in the remarks on the foundations of mathematics, we can also jump to this particular representation, and I will show you first of all how we do this here. So now we jump directly to the paragraph, and we can also do that from the home page again if we scroll it up and go back. And this is one of the new functionalities of this site that was not available before, because now we can browse the whole Nachlass by the published books. So maybe we simply don't know where some of the text originated, or we want to trace the sources a bit. So we can go in, scroll down to the remarks on the foundations of mathematics, and then, for example, take the second appendix of part 1 and have exactly the same view, but now we see it ordered as it was published. So the order might be completely different, and also grouped and aggregated as it was published, without losing the connection to the Nachlass documents. Because if we now click again here, so what it now gives us are these 2 different remarks, and if we again zoom into one of these, we can directly see that this is part of the TS 224. We can also jump to the facsimile if we like, and so here we now have the possibility of zooming in and looking at the facsimile. And this is obviously something that was possible before, in a sense, if you really knew where all the different remarks were coming from, but this is just a more comfortable way of accessing these sources. So what also is possible here is not just to find the primary source that the published work was taken from, the remark of the published work was taken from, but also see overlapping remarks, as we call it. So remarks that are textually similar, because Wittgenstein used similar phrases or similar words in these remarks. So if we go back to the view of the whole document here, what we have up there is always something called the text overlap of this particular work. And if we click on it, what it gives us are these Venn diagrams for all of the different remarks. So we can see that not just was the published work taken primarily from TS224, but also there is basically a one-to-one correspondence to TS221A and 221B, but also there is something here, the MS-118, the manuscript, which probably served as the version before Wittgenstein created the TypeScript. And we can now click on that as well, and we get an overview where the algorithm tries to highlight as best as it can where the overlap occurs, which can be quite helpful if you try to compare very, very long remarks. And so, yeah, this gives you the possibility to trace the sources back to their roots, even in manuscripts that, well, might not be directly available to you, even if you look at the Nachlass sources. So let's look at this in a more detailed example. So, for example, if we're interested in finding out where the remarks on the foundations of mathematics part 2 originated, we can use this text overlap function again. And so here we see exactly what Alois was talking about. So this is one of the cases where there was no TypeScript, but just a manuscript. So Wittgenstein never really prepared anything resembling this part of the foundations of the remarks on the foundations of mathematics for publication. And for most of these remarks, no other sources exist that are very similar to this one. So it might have been just a document where he tried out some ideas but never wanted to publish them later on. But for some of them, we can, and this is not a good example because here the overlap is not very large, but for some of these there is there are different sources where he tried it out before. So not exactly in this document, but let's look at another one. Or was it in this one? Let me check. Probably not this one. Yeah, anyway, so you can trace the textual development in these different remarks. So what I can show you now as well is in the third part where it gets a bit more interesting, that we can also trace the references, so to speak, or the similarities inside one particular document. So if we look at the case of remark 22, this one is it. So here we can see that apparently Wittgenstein, and as you can see here from the page numbers, these follow one another quite directly, basically. So here he seems to have tried out different versions of the same idea. So if we click here, we can see that it's both about the idea that a proof has to be perspicuous or surveyable. So, I mean, depends a bit on how you want to translate it. And so here you can see quite nicely that this was not a clear-cut idea that he just wrote down once, but he tried it out in different versions. And this maybe is not that interesting because you could have seen that yourself. I mean, these are pages 44 and 45. But there is also the case, which hopefully is the one here. So here again, 45, 48, and 48, 78. So this might be one that might be interesting, and maybe because this is a short phrase, is something that you might have overlooked otherwise. So you can see that 30 pages after first using this idea, Wittgenstein again wrote about der Beweis muss unser Vorbild, unser Bild davon sein, but then continued in a different way, which might or might not interest you, but at least makes this kind of textual search and the hunting for the sources a bit easier. So to now show you the fuzziness of the search, which was the challenge of this kind of tool. I will now quickly show you in the fourth part something that shows how the algorithm works a bit. So yeah, in number 7, yes. Yeah, so here for example, this is kind of like the minimal case that the algorithm will still find as being somewhat similar. So here you can see that on the left side, in both cases Wittgenstein is talking about the fact that a mathematical sentence or proposition is standing on either 3 feet or 4 feet. And so here, left side, he says that it's never standing on 3 feet. And then later on, so here we also have the dating and can see that 2 years later he basically decided to use a different way of putting the same point, and now is talking about those 4 feet of the table. So yeah, this is kind of the minimal case that the algorithm is still able to match. If there is less overlap than that, you probably wouldn't find the textual overlap.
Upper distinct is overdetermined, is that?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know more than that.
Yeah. Okay, so much for that. So now,
And to answer your question,
I don't really know
it-
German,
it-
but I
it-
kind of figure out.
Yeah, it would always be easy then to trace this remark into the publication, and from there you can go to the English translation. So actually you can also start the other way around, from the English translation in remarks on relations of mathematics, and come back to the German wording. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so much for the textual overlap for now. Later on we'll show you 2 examples of what you can do with it in practice. But one other feature of the site that I will want to demo really quickly is that there is also a search function available, which works a bit differently from the one you might know on Bitfind. So if you've ever used Bitfind before, you put in a term and then you get a list of all the remarks where the term is found. And so what you can do here is, this doesn't give you a list of hits directly, but rather it highlights the parts of the page where you're currently on that might match this search term. And so this allows us to search only in the published works, for example. So let's say I have no idea where Wittgenstein is writing about Cantor, but I know it must be somewhere in the remarks on the foundations of mathematics. So I can just type in Cantor and directly see that it's the second part of the remarks on the foundation of mathematics. And this is also possible with full sentence searches. So Härte des logischen Muss, for example, is also something that will be found. And here you can see that this again is a fuzzy search. So it kind of tries to match the search term perfectly. And in this case here there is a perfect match. But also in these other cases, there's something where Wittgenstein either talks about Härte together with Logik or Muss and logisches Muss. So it kind of tries its best, but in all the cases where not the perfect match is found, it still tries to give you hints of where you might look. So that might come in handy if you're not totally sure what exactly you're looking for. Okay, so much for the site in general. So now, to wrap this demo up, I want to show you 2 examples of what this might look like in practice. So one of the examples concerns still mathematics, but now not the published works of RFM, but now the Zettel. So let's look at these, and they're obviously down here. So I was reading Zettel and I stumbled upon a remark where Ramsey was mentioned, which is this one. And so this remark is basically, I mean, the 2 important things is that in the beginning Wittgenstein talks about this endlose Baumreihe, so an endless series of trees. And then it continues here, Ramsey pflegte auf solche Fragen zu antworten, so Ramsey used to answer these questions by blah, 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 blah. And this kind of struck me as strange because it didn't really seem to make sense to me, neither in the Zettel usually don't really have lots of context, but this kind of sounded a bit odd. So I first wanted to look at the facsimile because this might be helpful. So what we can do, we zoom in again and go down here, and we can directly see, well, it's on two different facsimile pages. Normally that's not very strange, but in the case of Zettel it might be a bit strange, because usually these are very short one-page remarks. So let's look at these two different facsimiles and see what's up there. So here we can see, I mean, down here it gives us the transcription, so it seems to be the last one on the page. Not surprising, since there's a page break. And so if we enter full screen and look at this, so down here, yeah, so here it's about the endless series of trees, and then it ends before Ramsey is mentioned. And I just want to point out that here we have these lines here, so yeah, let's just keep that in mind and look at the other one, which is of course the beginning of this page. And so here it starts with Ramsey, no lines whatsoever, so this seems a bit strange, and I wasn't really sure whether these two Zettel really are related or should have been published as different Zettels. So, and in the published works they are taken together, and the editors added a footnote saying this is basically, there was something left out, but Wittgenstein wanted these to be put together. So, well, did the trustees make a mistake here or not? Well, we can answer that quite easily if we start looking at the textual overlap that this Zettel remark has in the other parts of the Nachlass, because quite obviously the Zettel usually originates somewhere. So if we look at the text overlap in Zettel and look at the remark here, so yeah, there are different sources where it might have originated, and I will not show you all of these, but just a few that have a larger overlap. So let's look at a few of them, and yeah, these ones here, so the rest is identical. Okay, let's close the two facsimiles. Okay, so what we can see here now is that, quite interestingly, while on the right side, and this is the Zettel, Wittgenstein talks about the endless series of trees and Ramsey. So here it's only about Ramsey, but the part before is completely different, because here Wittgenstein is talking about the sense organ and sense perception. So, well, already not in favor of the interpretation of the trustees, but let's look at other sources as well. So here again, so it's again about sense perception, and then it continues with Ramsey. And now let's look at the one over here. So this is now the Zettel here, and this is the 228. And so again, sense organ, sense perception. Here, same thing. And if we now go back and look at, I think it's these ones. We want to see the source of, yeah, so this is the source, or one of the sources of the part about the endless series of trees. And of course it doesn't continue with Ramsey here, but with something completely different. So, and from this we can, I think, quite conclusively well, say that this must have been a mistake on the part of the trustees, and the Zettel don't really belong together. Yeah, so much for the one example, and the last one is something that I want to take from the wonderful handout from the last talk, and I want to look at the quotations L and Q, which originate from the part number 7 on the, so it's about the expansion of pi. So let's look at the sources of that quotation. So again, we start from the main page, we go down to the published works, part 7 here, we go to the text overlap to figure out where it came from, and now scroll a bit to 41, which is here, yeah. And so here, first of all, we get one textual overlap, which we can look at quickly. Isn't this one? No, let me close these ones first, sorry. So we get one textual overlap. So and here you can see that the Venn diagrams not only show you how large the overlap is, but also how the ratio of these different remarks actually is. So this one, the smaller one, is actually completely contained in the bigger remark here. And so now we see that the remark here seems to continue with the part that in English is translated as, for one thing, they hide certain problems. And we might be interested in the question of whether this really is a new addition in the manuscript 124, or something that is in 127 as well. So we can go again to 127, and as I said, everything is kind of hyperlinked here, and jump directly to this particular position. And there we see that here, also in document MS-127, Wittgenstein continues exactly with the same sentence, simply split into two different remarks. So there we kind of have a perfect overlap. But what I really wanted to point out, and which might be interesting and is something that this tool gives you quite easily, so look at the page numbers here. So these are these four remarks in MS-124 make up the remark 41 in the published work. And so as you can see, while before we were here kind of in the range of 135, 137, 138, 139, then suddenly there's the page 175. So what this tool allows you is to kind of see where the trustees took the different sources from, and where they went in and moved something around, sometimes with a reason, sometimes, well, just with not so good reasons, so let's put it this way. And I mean, sometimes this makes a lot of sense, because Wittgenstein quite often used editorial instructions and said, well, this belongs to this particular page, and they simply, well, followed this instruction. And we can look at that too by clicking on the remark here. And so, as I said, I mean, this view you get here is the kind of reader-friendly version, but we can also go to the facsimile and check for an editorial instruction, or even go to the diplomatic transcription, which is also hyperlinked here into the whole system. And so, yeah, so this would be the diplomatic version of the whole page. And so here you can see that, well, there doesn't seem to be any kind of editorial instruction referring to a different page. So this must have been a decision made by the trustees, and they thought it would fit in the other context better than here. Yeah, so that was the demo of the little tool. Yeah, now I think time for discussion or questions.
All right, thanks very much.